All right. Hello, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. It is noon, and I'm sure folks will trickle in. Um, I think I know everyone here or have spoken at least via email, but just in case anyone doesn't know, my name's Adeline Padlina, and I am the Treatment Court Grants Program Coordinator for the CJC. And today's hopefully helpful webinar is about the final application for the 2025-2027 Treatment Court Grant application that is you're all deep into right now. So first and foremost, before we get started, thank you. Thanks for making it. You're like over halfway. So I know it's a lot. I really appreciate you all going through this process with us and being so grateful or graceful, excuse me, with, the occasional mistake that we're making and all of those things. So I think you're all a fun bunch of grantees. Today, we are going to go ahead and talk about a couple things. First and foremost, we'll start with the timeline. We're going to go over some common feedback questions that both I've been receiving as well as I had a couple pointers come through from Rachel Mark at OJD. She wasn't able to join us today, but she did send me a couple questions that she's receiving. We'll go over how to find that 5% cap as you all are making your budget requests. We'll also do some just brief kind of guidelines around funding requests. And then we will do a very brief high-level overview of the budget projection sheet. Now, any questions that come up, by all means, feel free to raise your hand. We have dismantled the chat for this just because it's being recorded and it's going to go online. So if you have a question, just raise your hand virtually and we will get to it. My colleague and really the epicenter of all things in the background of treatment court, Shelby, is keeping an eye on all of this, and she'll help me get through questions and stuff as well. We are not, though, going to talk about a couple things today, and that's specifically around the individual feedback letters and scorecards you all received a week or two ago. If you are going through those and you are having questions and you're like, Adeline, I just don't get it, you can always send me an email. Rachel Mark is also helping with those. If you have questions around, how decisions were made to score, the methodologies that we use, those kinds of things, those are the questions I can answer. If you're like, how do I turn this scorecard and this feedback into a request, that is going to go to Rachel Mark. But we're happy to answer those questions and send you in the right direction, just not during this public meeting. So with that, let's go ahead and get started, shall we? Let's first and foremost talk about the timeline. So these applications, the final applications, are due on July 1st at 11:59. I've gotten a lot of requests around what time. We are giving you literally up to the very last minute of July 1st. So make sure that you're submitting those in SM Apply. If you're having any problems getting in there, I know a couple courts have had some staffing changes, that kind of thing. If you need access, please let myself know, let Shelby know. We can make that, just double check things are working correctly on the back end. We're happy to do that because we cannot accept any late applications. So no midnight, it's got to be 11:59 or before. After that, staff are going to review them, and then we will bring them to the grant review committee meeting on the 28th and 29th. Now we are hoping, we are manifesting, we are putting out the vibes that this will all be done in one meeting on one day on July 28th. But we do have that backup day in case it does go longer, because these are big decisions to be made that affect courts for the next 2 years. So we want to give them our full attention and full time, but we are hoping we can get it into that first meeting. Regardless, if it's one meeting or two, they will be recorded. They are a public meeting, so you can access them if you'd like to attend. You can find that link when it's available on the CJC website. There's a calendar, just go to July 28th and you'll be able to find that link and follow it there. But if you don't want to spend 8 hours watching a meeting, that's okay too. It'll again be recorded. It'll be put up on the CJC YouTube page, and you'll be able to fast forward. Not that I don't think you all just want to watch me talk for 8 hours, but That's another way you can do it as well. Then we will take that feedback from the grant review committee. And then on August 19th, we will have another public meeting, and that one is in front of the Criminal Justice Commission. So the Criminal Justice Commission is a 9-panel commission who makes all of the final award decisions. Treatment courts is no different. I'll present that information to them on August 19th. And then everything will officially be decided. So that's good news in the sense that you all will then know what funding you will be receiving. We will send out contracts. You'll get award letters, and then you will get your contract sent to you in 2020 or in 2025, in September of 2025. Now, friendly reminder, I'm sure you all know this by now, but our contracts are with the counties. So the contract will go directly to the person that you have given to us as the county contact. Now, a couple of things that are a little bit different about the 25 to 27 biennium versus the 23 to 25 biennium we're in now. The biggest difference is that this one is a 26-month project period. So you'll be able to spend the 25-27 grant program funds from July 1st of 2025 to August 31st of 27. So you have those full 26 months to spend money. Then what is that November 30th number below that? That is when everything is terminated. So you won't be able to spend money after August 31st, but we need some time to basically cross our T's, dot our I's, get any funds returned, all that good stuff. It's just room for us to tie everything up at the very end of that. So just know your money cannot be spent past August 31st, but everything will still be wrapping up through November 30th, and that is when the contracts officially terminate. Any timeline questions? Yeah, Frank, go ahead.
Hello.
Hi.
Quick question about the review process, the grant review committee. Do they have a specific order in which they review, or is it at random or first come, or how does that work?
So I can't give you a specific answer. It's typically how staff decide to present them. So typically what we'll do, and please do not write this down in stone, typically what we do is the amount of courts. So typically adult drug courts go first, mental health courts go next, followed by family treatment courts, and on from there. So I can't tell you the exact order, but that should give you a little bit of a guideline. Does that help?
That does. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Cheryl. Cheryl, if you have a question, the floor is yours. I don't know if you're muted. Shelby on the back end tried to unmute you and was unable to. All right. I'm going to go ahead and keep going, but Cheryl, if you can hear this, hopefully you can. If and when you're able to unmute and have a question, please absolutely let us know and we can come back.
Okay, I think I'm off of mute.
There you are. We hear you just in time.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
This laptop. So I have a question about the spending period. Would we want to, since it's 26 months, would we actually want to, for example, if we have a contract with an agency, would we want to go ahead and calculate that contract through the 26 months, or would we want to just calculate it through the 24 months that we typically would, and then just knowing that we have that extra time for them to submit invoices and things? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I can tell you, I can't tell you the answer to that. That's each county gets to decide that. But I will say that the idea behind the 26 months was to provide a little bit of overlap coverage the way that you're describing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions about the timeline? And we'll have time for questions at the end too. So if we get a couple slides in and something, was like, oh, that reminds me about something we talked about earlier, feel free. We'll have time. Okay, let's get into then some common feedback questions that we received. So as you can see on the right, hopefully this looks familiar. This is a example feedback letter that you all should have received one of these a couple weeks ago. When I sent out that big long email, it should come with your scorecard. If you did not receive that, please let me know, and I am more than happy to get it to you. This example is for a made-up Stetson County, and Stetson County's namesake, who is one of my dogs, is the picture in there, just in case you were wondering. So the feedback that we gave in those letters, or these letters, I guess, were organized in kind of two main ways or two main parts. So that first half is going to say, this is the feedback that we're giving. And then that second part in that middle is, these are the standards that you missed. So feedback was pretty liberal. Honestly, we gave feedback for a lot of different reasons. It could have been directly because a standard was missed, but it was also anytime something wasn't clear, if a question in those narratives weren't completely answered or made us have other questions, if there was a discrepancy between what was reported in the scorecard, because remember those scorecards were created through SCMS data and data from the SCOPS. So if there was a discrepancy in between that and the narrative, we opted to give the feedback just in case. And then anytime that more information was needed. So this really, the hope with the feedback was to say, hey, this is some stuff that just needs a double check, right? Just look at this, maybe, go back around and see where we're at. The standards were not met. Those, again, are going to be in that second section of the letter. And those you can get into more detail on those if you look at the scorecard. Now, regardless, when you're taking this feedback, or if you choose to take this feedback, and when you are looking at the standards, any request that you're making that's tied back to this feedback should also be tied to the standards and to best practices. Now, you are going to be able to respond to the feedback that was given in two different places in the final application. So the first place is going to be in SCMS. This is going to, in SM Apply. There's too many S's, there's too many M's. In SM Apply, when you go into your final application, you'll see a section that says Edits to Preliminary Application. Now, this is going to be a great spot to know any changes that you feel like the GRC needs to know that have happened from when you did your preliminary application. And it's going to be a great spot to respond to feedback that doesn't necessarily require funding or that isn't tied to funding. So one example that came to mind really quickly was if you received feedback to stand up an advisory committee or a policy committee. You probably most likely don't need funds to do that. But if you wanted to let the GRC know, hey, we heard you, here's how we're going to do this, or here's our plan, or here's what we're going to do, this section here is going to be a great place to do that. However, I do want to note a couple things about this section. First and foremost, it's just an open narrative portion. So if you are responding to specific feedback, let us know what question that's coming from. So you'll look back at your preliminary application, say, oh, they gave this feedback on question 5. Here's my response on question 5. Otherwise, it'll just be a big paragraph and it'll be really hard for us to know kind of what you're talking about. The second thing is that we do realize this is a limit, but you only have 700 words. So if you're trying to respond to multiple pieces of feedback, you are going to need to keep it pretty concise. Like I've mentioned, we have 59 of these applications to get through. We're a small staff, so this was kind of a middle ground area that we're hoping to get good information. We want to be able to tell the GRC what you all are doing, but we also have limited capacity. So don't fear the bullet point. We love bullet points. Just keep it clear, keep it concise. concise, and let us know again which question you're responding to. Also, another question that I have received a couple times is about uploading new documents. So this will be, you'll see under this in the same area, there's an optional place to re-upload new documents, like if you have a LPSC letter, those MOUs, letter from the presiding judge, all that good stuff. Unless there have been any updates. So maybe there's new signatures. If a document previously was missing and you didn't have it and you had said like, hey, we need a little more time, those kinds of things, then you can update a new letter. But if nothing has changed, if you had all of those documents in during the preliminary application, nothing has changed, you do not have to re-upload them. We're not trying to make you do twice the work. If they were good before, they're still good now, and you don't have to worry about it. Now, the second area, though, that I think will be, frankly, a little more useful for putting in that feedback or responding to that feedback, is going to be in the narrative sections of the budget projection sheet. And this is going to be really helpful for you all if you are tying your budget requests to the feedback that you received. So we're going to go into the budget projection sheet in a little bit at the end of this presentation. So I will kind of show you what I'm talking about a little bit more. But this should look familiar to anyone who did these during the last biennium. At the end of every category, right? They're broken into categories where you're going to request funds. At the far right of all of them, they have this narrative section. And this is going to be one for every category, and you're going to use these to tie those budget requests back to the feedback, back to standards, back to best practices. Now, this is, to be clear, it's on the expense tab of the budget projection sheet for this one. And again, we'll go over this. There is a second tab that's prioritization. We'll get into that too. No, this one you're looking for on the expense tab. Now, if you end up giving feedback in this narrative section on the budget projection sheet, you do not need to give it in that preliminary application spot in SM Apply that I mentioned before. And vice versa. If you're giving feedback in this section, you don't need to put anything in this narrative section. Is that making sense to everyone? We are really trying to respect that this is a huge lift for you all, and we're trying not to make anyone do twice the work. Any questions about where to respond to feedback, how to respond to feedback? All right, we're cruising then. Let's talk about the 5% cap. Now, I know a lot of you already have this done, so take this time to get a snack, get a drink, whatever, if you don't need it. But I just did want to revisit this because we have had quite a few questions about how do you find out how much your potential max award is. So for this, what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to open up any expense sheet that we've sent you between Q4 and now. And so on those, you will note a budget modification tab. And in the top right-hand corner of that budget modification tab, there are a bunch of boxes, and they should look like this. And they'll give you a total original award, which is the total amount that you were awarded or your court was awarded at the end or at the beginning of the 23-25 biennium. Then you'll see in this line below, there's new additional funding. Now, harken back to Q3, short session, threw us all kind of a big surprise and was like, hey, treatment courts, you're getting a bunch of extra money, which is great. We loved it. It was one-time funding, though. So just a reminder. So the bummer, it was only one-time funding, but also great news. You will not have to do this level of mathing again. So you win some, you lose some. But you're going to add that original funding that you received plus that new additional funding received. Then you're going to scroll all the way down on that same sheet, and on the bottom, line 300, there's going to be another line that says available but unrequested funds. That is going to be the money that was offered to your court that for whatever reason was not accepted, right? So it was offered, but it wasn't awarded. So we don't want to say, oh, you took this money when you didn't. So you're going to subtract that money. And then if you were one of the 13 courts that just declined any of your final disbursement, some declined all of it, some declined a partial amount. If you're one of those 13, you're also going to subtract that amount that you declined because, again, it wasn't awarded. Now, if you are one of those 13 courts and you're panicking because you're like, I don't remember how much it was, I don't remember if we were, don't panic. Just let me know. I can get you that information. I can give you that dollar amount, all that good stuff. But if you do that math, so you add those first two numbers, you subtract if you had available but unrequested funds, and subtract if you declined any amount of disbursement, that's going to get you the total funding that the CJC awarded you for the 23-25 biennium. You're going to take that number and you're going to multiply it by 0.05, and that's going to get you that additional 5% that you could ask for in the 25-27. And then, of course, you're going to add that to the total funding, and that's going to give you your maximum amount. Now, I think it should be noted, I have not taken a math class since 2011. So if that was confusing or unhelpful or just felt like you were back in high school with a math teacher droning on, I apologize. I am always happy to go over this with folks one-on-one so we can use your individual numbers. That's totally fine. But any questions thus far? Are we feeling good about how to find out that maximum amount that you can request? Okay, I thank you, whoever sent me that thumbs up. This is the most stressful part of the presentation for me. I cannot stress to you how much I did not enjoy math test or math class. Okay, let's talk about the funding request then. So once you have that number, right, you know the amount that you can request, you have your feedback, you have your scorecard, you are ready to roll. Let's talk about a few other things that you'll want to keep in mind when you're filling out those budget projection sheets. Now, first and foremost, these funds are, of course, being awarded to the county, but we strongly, strongly encourage, because it does affect our coordinators and those working with OJD as well, we really hope that you all are working together to make these requests. So we hope the county folks, OJD personnel, are working together for this process. That's really how it was intended, and you'll see it kind of when we go through the budget projection sheet. All that being said, friendly reminder, this biennium, again, in part due to those that House Bill 4002 and 5204, which gave us that additional funding in Q3, that also sent OJD personnel funds to OJD. So you won't be asking for any OJD personnel through this process. That needs to go through their process over at OJD, separate. There will be requests allowed for supplies and training and travel that will potentially go to OJD. Now, why potentially? I want to just clarify something. In the past few grant cycles, the CJC had an interagency agreement directly with OJD, and that was just to ensure that we could allocate funds to OJD easily, efficiently as possible. Definitely super important, right, when we were giving funds to them to pay their coordinators, right? Now, because we aren't using those grant funds to fund coordinators, the CJC is going to look at the total number of requests before confirming that we're going to do that IAA with OJD. And so we just want to be like really upfront with you all. We just need to see what the requests look like. If it's a very low number of requests to send those training and travel funds, to send those supplies funds over to OJD, it's a lot of work on the back end for us at the CJC. And so we just want to make sure that it is a good, that it's an efficient use of our time. So to be clear though, if you request, $5,000 for supplies, whether or not we send those $5,000 or part of it to OJD, if you are awarded those funds, it will still go to you. It won't affect the amount that's awarded. It just could potentially affect where the funds are awarded to. Does that make sense? Anyone have questions about that? Yeah, Jessica.
Thank you. So I just want to clarify that for these county applications, what I think I'm hearing you say is that you strongly suggest we stick to the 12,000, but we need to be collaborating with OJD on what they're asking for on their side so that the total together equals 12,000. Is that correct?
Yeah, you jumped ahead a little bit to training and travel, but yes, that is absolutely true. So we can jump there now. So for training and travel specifically, we strongly suggest sticking to that $12,000 total. That includes all training and travel. And also, again, in the interest of transparency, we will absolutely be prioritizing in-state training and travel. So OJD has some awesome trainings planned. There's a couple other groups that are doing them. Quite frankly, in-state travel and training is just a lot more return on investment. There's a lot of value in it, right? You get more for your money. And so with that, we will be prioritizing that. But yes, that $12,000 for training and travel includes everything, whether it gets allocated to OJD or whether it stays with the county. Did that answer your question?
It does. Thank you very much.
Of course, of course. Now, a couple other just individual things to remember. No alumni requests. Again, this is not a reflection about how anyone feels about alumni. Alumni groups are doing incredible things across the state. It's just that with limited funds, we really have to focus on the participants that are actively in treatment courts. Again, a reminder, make sure you're linking those requests that you're making back to the standards, back to best practices, and if applicable, back to your feedback. Now, administrative costs, I always put this one up here because I know some grants elsewhere, federal grants, etc., have changed this, but our administrative costs for this grant are still capped at 10%. It's on the budget projection sheet. I'll show it to you when we get there, but I just want to be really clear that that is not changed at all. That is still capped at that 10%. And then finally, if you were really paying attention and really reading that really long email that I sent you a couple weeks ago, there was a note that said, hey, just FYI, there's the potential that OJD may opt to use 10% of supplies and travel and training if it was sent to them for administrative costs. They came back actually just yesterday and let us know that they have decided they will not be opting to do that. So still 10% total cap on administrative costs for the county, but you don't have to worry about figuring in that potential up to 10% for the supplies and training and travel that were going to be allocated to OJD. You don't have to worry about figuring out what 10% of that would look like and where it would go and all that good stuff. And then finally, one more note just about as you're making these requests in general and you're doing the budget projection in general. We really encourage you to look at what you genuinely need and what you genuinely think that you will use, because while we don't have the official total locked in, it has not been signed yet, we are pretty confident that we're going to have roughly the same amount of funds for this biennium that we did last biennium. And then we have more applicants. So more courts are applying for funding, which means, right, that funding is going to be tight. And if you're new to this process, we had to cut over 9 million of requests during the last biennium. So we really would prefer not to do that. We really want you all to get the funding that you need to keep these programs going, to keep doing all the incredible work, right? Because we've seen the data, like treatment courts work and they work really well. So we want to keep seeing that. So just know that when you are making those requests, we will be looking and considering the 23-25 spending that you all did. So if you're asking for that cap, so the same amount or more as the 23-25 biennium, but we're underspent, you're going to really have to explicitly explain how you'll avoid the underspending this time for your request to be considered, because there's just so much need for that money all across the state. And really just, again, hoping that you'll really tie those asks to gaps in resources. That's what this grant was originally intended for, was really to fill those gaps where you can't get other funding. And then just, again, a friendly reminder that that 5% cap is in place. And if it's ignored, we will, like, staff will adjust your budget request accordingly. So kind of, I felt like a lot of that was a little bit of a downer. So I thought that Stetson was really bringing the vibe here. Just kind of like, yay, money, but also like there's a lot of work and a lot of energy, both on your part and ours, going into it. So we're going to do our best. Frank, please.
Hello. So thank you for the dog pictures. That's great. Appreciate it. You said significant underspent. What does significant mean?
So really what we're looking for is how, like, if you're in, right, because by the time that we go through these and have these, we'll have like your Q8 spending. And so if you're still, you know, below 40%, you're below 50% spend in Q8, that's going to give us pause if you're asking for a full amount or the same amount. And again, I want to be clear, I guess not again, I forgot to say this earlier. When we are capping you to that 5%, it's for the total amount. I did get an email saying like, oh, you know, our category for, I can't remember what it was, I think supplies, the supplies category is over that 5% of what we asked in the supplies category last time. That's fine if the categories are different. It's just a total cap for the total request. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. All right. And I do know this appendix slide real quick for a couple things. So these, you'll get a copy of the slide deck and you'll be able to go to all these links. So it has a link to the 25-27 solicitation. I know you all have it, but in case you wanted to go back through and read anything, it will have a link to the budget projection sheet, which again, excuse me, you all should have. It should have been emailed to you, but in case it got lost, it wasn't. It's easier to find it this way than going back through 10,000 emails, whatever works. Also, you can find a link to the Oregon Specialty Court standards, as well as our new and improved grant administration guide, which we lovingly refer to as the GAG. It's new as of a couple months ago, and so you can find links to the new one on our website or here. It really, honestly, didn't change a lot of things for treatment courts the same way it did for a couple of our other grants that come through the CJC, but definitely worth taking a look as you're making these budget requests. And then finally, there's a link to the All Rise Best Practice Standards, those national standards as well. So with that, I just want to see if there's any more questions before we take a brief tour through the budget projection sheet. Does anyone have anything else that we haven't covered that you desperately need to know? If you do come up with anything, as always, this has my email address. You can always email me. You also are welcome to call me, but I just feel the need to always say this. Please leave a voicemail. I get so many telemarketers. People are very concerned about my car's extended warranty that I will often let it go to voicemail to make sure that the person who has called me is a real person that actually wants to know about treatment courts and is less interested in getting me to pay my toll for bridges I have not crossed. So if you do get my voicemail, leave a message. I will absolutely call you back as soon as I can. Also, I never mind a Teams meeting. Sometimes those are a little bit easier because we can pull up your spreadsheets, your numbers, etc. Janice, please.
Thank you. Question really quick, going back to the training.
Yeah.
The $12,000 cap. That is including All Rise, correct?
Yes.
For the whole biennium. So that's 2 separate All Rise events, 1 biennium, included for the 12,000 cap for each grant. So if we have 2 courts, that's 12,000 each court.
Yep, it's 12,000 per court. And yes, and I know folks have gotten over the last couple biennium, they've gotten pretty used to being able to send people to RISE every year. And we've just because there was a little bit of an influx of funding, folks were able to send more people. That has not always been the case. And we are expecting, if I'm just to be frank, we are expecting that we won't have as much funding to send as many folks to RISE through this grant as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Angie.
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you now.
Pardon me?
Yes, we can hear
Okay,
you now.
Okay. I just have a question. Is it appropriate to email you after this call to confirm the maximum amount of funds we can request?
Absolutely. Yes,
Okay.
by all means.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. That's also a really lovely segue, Angie. Thank you for letting you all know. And I'm really sorry about this, to give you a bunch of information that is going to potentially inspire a bunch of questions and then leave. So I will be working throughout the rest of today, but I will be out Thursday and Friday. So I apologize. I'm going to be in Colorado officiating a wedding, but I won't have email access. So please do send me your questions, though. Email me. Just know that I won't be able to get back to you until as soon as I can next week. All right. Any other questions before we do one of my least favorite things, which is trying to skip to a different program while I am having multiple people watch me and being recorded? All right. Now, hopefully, we can go through this. Kudos to my coworker, Shelby, who, bless her, spent multiple minutes with me trying to figure this out a couple days ago. All right, here we go. Did we do it? Can everyone see a budget projection sheet? Incredible. Thank you for your thumbs. Now, I will, full disclosure, I cannot see your lovely faces as well. So if you have anything, please feel free to unmute and ask your questions. So we're going to go through real quick. You'll note down here, there's an expenses tab and a prioritization tab. So we're going to start with expenses. Now, a couple of things. This will look familiar. You're going to put your treatment court. There's a drop down, let you choose. But please, on this one, I know that many of the courts have some really awesome names that you call yourself in your communities and internally. I unfortunately don't know them. And there are a lot of you. So a friendly reminder, even if you're Bear Court, your Rap Court, your all the different fun names on the application, if you can please make our lives as easy as possible, put the county and what type of court you are. That is what we're looking for. So we're looking for if you're an adult drug court in Stetson County, if you're a juvenile court, if you're a mental health court, go ahead and label it that way. You don't have to put your internal label in there at all. Know as well that it's no disrespect to your names. It's just really hard for us to keep track of everything because there's a lot of you all. When you're going through, you'll see that there are multiple categories. So we have personnel, we have contractual services, all the things. Hopefully scrolling isn't making anyone seasick. And each category is going to have directions above it. So please make sure that you're keeping an eye on those, especially when we get down to the contractual services. Now, all of the directions are important. I just note contractual services because this part of the sheet is different. It's brand new from what we did in past biennia. So we have put really detailed directions here, but also just so you all know, for each column title here, if you hover over the top in that red arrow, it'll give you additional information about what we are asking. I thought it was especially important kind of around like these two where it's asking what amount of time and like what is the last biennium and all that kind of stuff. Now, I do want to note, just because we talked about it in depth earlier in the webinar, if you scroll over to this side, these are those narrative sections that I was mentioning before, where you can, talk about why you're making the request that you're making. And this would be a great place to tie it back to feedback you received from the GRC. Now, as we go down, a little bit more about contractual services. Now, it's noted in the directions, but I just want you all to hear it. These items should be limited to non-billable services. So we are expecting that folks are billing OHP, billing insurance, etc. So anything in here is going to be non-billable. Now, as we go down, we have housing and facilities, you'll see, equipment, which is variably used in treatment courts, but we'll get to supplies. And when we were talking about, you'll have the opportunity to request to transfer funds to OJD. Instead of OJD having their own separate spreadsheet, we tried to smush them together. And so now it's just a drop down of whether or not you would like these funds to potentially be transferred to OJD, yes or no. So hopefully this makes it a little bit easier to maintain all the funds, right? To know which funds are going where, how much money you have, all that good stuff. Hopefully it keeps it contained and it's a little bit easier, saves you from having to do a lot of copying and pasting to a second sheet. Now, I do want to note specifically with supplies, this is true for any of the categories, but I thought it would be really helpful specifically with supplies. We often have folks requesting for, say, participant supports or anything that's going to kind of cover a wide range of stuff. You are welcome to put that all together in one line item. Just let us know roughly how you're going to break it down. So for instance, in this example one, this person wanted, as you can see here, $2,000 for life skills supports. And then in this description broke down, this could cover a driver's license, which costs $60, state ID cards, $44.50, DMV reinstatement fees. So these are things that you're like, hey, we potentially could see ourselves covering this, and this is a rough breakdown so that we know at the CJC, like, why, okay, they're asking for $2,000 to cover all these things. That makes sense. And then again, I want to note, we've talked about it a couple times, but this does cover 26 months. And I think that kind of covers this one, this tab, at least the expenses tab. Oh, I did mention that we'd talk over administrative costs. So again, this is the section for administrative costs, and it will give you down here, oops, at the bottom, it will give you the administrative total that you're asking for. And you'll just want to make sure that that is 10% or less of your total. And it'll actually do that breakdown for you because we try to make you do as little math as possible. So you'll know if you're asking for, in this case, 36,000, that would be 9.86% of the total. So just make sure that that number right there doesn't go over 10%. All right. Again, I can't really see folks very well, but do we have any kind of basic high-level questions about the expense sheet before we go and talk about the prioritization sheet? And again, I can't really see you, so if you have one, feel free to be brave and just take off your microphone and start talking, or take off your mute.
Adeline, this is Angie. Can you hear me?
I can. Yeah, perfect.
So I have two questions. One
Sure.
is, in the transfer of funds to OJD, is that all or nothing by category? So for example, if we wanted to split it 4,000 and 2,000, that the county kept 2,000 and we did 4,000 for travel, can that be done, or is it all or nothing by line item?
Oh, it is so it is, I guess, by line item, but what you could do is say, okay, you can have the same thing. So for instance, I had them split by year in this example, but if you wanted to say, like, in-state training for OJD for, 2026, and you want to say, yes, I do want to transfer those funds, you could do another one that says in-state trainings county and then say no for those ones.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question is, how much detail do you want in the contracted services? So for example, if we pay for a non-billable or non-eligible for UAs that can't be billed to OHP, and most of them are 12 panel, but some are 10 panel and some are 9 panel, can we combine those under the 12 panel? And if they're less expensive than that, include it in that total, or do you need those broken down?
No, you don't need to break them down in the line item. Okay, let me say this. For our purposes, you can say just test and you don't have to break them down. It would be helpful over here to say, here's the cost of the 10 panel, here's the cost of the 12 panel, etc. However, once you get in here, I don't know, but you might find it easier to break it down just because it'll do the math for you. It does a lot of the formula. So you might find it easier because they are different prices to do it that way. So it's fine either way, whatever is easier for you once you get in there.
Thank you.
I feel like maybe I saw another hand, but didn't see who it was attached to.
Adeline, this
Yes.
is Jessica Beach.
Hi, Jessica.
Hi. So again, in training and associated travel, so we need a lot of detail here. We cannot specifically just say training. The CJC needs us to separate out RISE, in-state, incentive camp. So we have to be that detailed.
I think it would be in your best interest to at least split out in-state and out-of-state travel. So I think if you're saying, I want this much funding to send folks to RISE, and I want this much funding for in-state training, I think that's really helpful for us because we're going to be prioritizing in-state travel and training. That being said, I don't want you to feel like you have to break down every single potential training, right? You don't have to say it's, in this, if you said, hey, these in-state trainings put on by OJD, that would be enough information for us. Or this conference that I know a couple of folks sent people, I want to say it was like a training in Oklahoma that was not RISE and not an OJD related one. So for the bigger ones like that are going to be out of state, it's helpful to know. I think you can combine a lot more of the in-state training. Does that make sense?
I think so, and I really appreciate seeing this. I don't know if it's possible to send this actual example out to the group, but that would be really helpful if it is. I do
let me know if you don't have it. It was sent, so it was sent in that same email that you should have gotten a feedback letter, your scorecard, a template for the budget sheet, and then an example as well. So if you don't have it, yes, I'm more than happy to
have it then.
Okay.
One last quick question. Sorry, forgive me. On supplies, could you scroll back up to supplies?
I never apologize. That is quite literally the point of this webinar, is to answer questions.
Okay, so I'm just seeing here, again, it just looks like maybe more detail is wanted, like bus passes, for example. So historically, I think we've just said incentives or participant supports, but you're wanting us to go into really specific detail like that?
I mean, I tried in part to do it this way because they were a really easy one to showcase. Okay, this is a price per unit. We're going to need 500 bus passes, right? So it was easier to show. I think that if you don't want to break them out that way, again, going over to like life skill supports, we just need to know, okay, we are expecting to buy 100 bus passes and they cost this much, right? Or just to give us a guide in case we do have to make reductions, of making sure that we're not just saying slashing and burning, oh, you know, all of these supports. We can say, okay, let's cut down bus passes from 500 to 400 or something like that. So the more detail you give us, the more helpful it is to us, in when we have to, if, right, hopefully we don't have to, but if we have to make these reductions, it can give us guidance on how to do that.
That's really helpful. And let me just throw in another monkey wrench. For instance, I know that Yamhill County applications, we plan to submit a request for bus passes.
Mhm.
However, currently all bus passes since COVID have been free, all transport. I know
incredible.
that it's coming up very soon, but I don't know what the cost will be yet.
Sure.
So do we just best guess?
Do best guess, and remember, and this is actually a great segue. Remember that while we do want to know as much as possible, right, and we are making our absolute best guess on these, we also recognize that, like, you all can't tell the future. Like, you can't know what's going to happen in 2027. So our processes of adjusting funds, of moving funds, all of that are still going to be in place. So if you say, hey, I want to ask for 50 bus passes just in case they do decide they're not going to be free anymore, then okay, we understand that. And then if going forward you were like, great news, Yamhill kept buses free, I want to move that and I want to turn it into cell phones instead, that is absolutely a request you can make.
And one more clarifying question, forgive me. So do we then have to put reallocation requests in? So if, say, under supplies, instead of bus passes, we want to do phones, do we have to do a total reallocation request for that? Or as long as we stay in the amount in this category, are we okay?
So if you're moving funds within the same line item, so say you decide, like, we're going to make this all, I don't know, participant supports, or I think you said incentives, right? If those are all in the same line item of incentives, that's fine. If you're going to be, for the purposes of this process right here, and you're like, it's really important that we get these bus passes, or it's really important we get these phones, and you do them out by line item, what we can do is, once the final awards are out and we know how much money each court is getting, what you can do then is say, hey, I would like to combine all these line items into one and, like, put it under incentives. And you'll do one budget adjustment the same way that you've done it now in SM Apply, and then we can smush that all together. And then going forward for the next 26 months, you don't have to be like, I want to move $10. You know what I mean? Like, it just makes it a little bit easier, I think, in that sense of not having to push things around as much.
Thank you.
Of course. Any other questions? And again, I'm going to reiterate that I'm sorry, but I cannot see you all.
This is Ani. I had a quick question.
Hi, Ani. Yes.
Hey, so I want to make sure I understand this correctly. For the funds going to OJD.
Mhm.
So when we had requested before, there was just a small amount that was approved to go over to OJD for supplies. But based on this, it would be appropriate to ask for a significant amount to go over for, like, our coordinator to do the purchasing and whatnot. Is that appropriate and correct in my understanding?
Yeah, you can absolutely move within, it's really up to you how much of these funds you want transferred to OJD. We don't, to my knowledge, I'm gonna give my colleagues a chance if I am misspeaking to jump in and say that's not true. But to my knowledge, you're allowed to request that transfer up to as much as you would like in those two categories, of course. You can't do it in the non-OJD categories.
Okay, so supplies and then the training and travel are the OJD categories.
Yeah, and we are very aware that for a lot of folks, it is much easier to make those purchases sometimes, especially if you're trying to make a purchase really quickly, right? If there's a participant needs a specific supply, you're trying to buy a bus ticket or something like that, it can be easier for the OJD folks to do it with a spots card. So we're trying to hopefully keep that efficiency there.
Okay, that makes sense. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions? Okay, let's real quick, because I do want to keep to your all's lunch break. Let's move real quick to the prioritization sheet. So this is new, brand new, and hopefully will be helpful to you all. So what this is if you've been through this process before, you know that the CJC had to make a lot of cuts or a lot of reductions. And it's hard, right? It's hard for us. We don't like to do it. It's hard for you all because you're like, hello, I asked for this money. I would like it. And so our hope by creating this prioritization sheet is it gives you an opportunity as the court's filling this out to really say, hey, this is really important. This is what we want to do with our funds. So again, there are instructions in here as well, but what it's going to ask in this section, and you're going to pull these over from your expense sheet, is what are the 3 line items that you are prioritizing most. So at the end of the day, if we have to make cuts, these are the 3 things that you do not want cut if at all possible. Those are going to go on top. It's going to give you a total amount, right? And so that's really helpful for you all to say like, okay, what percent of my budget is that? How compared to the rest I'm asking, what does that look like? This is for you to fill out straight across. Then these boxes here, you're going to want to do, sorry, I should have said this from the beginning. You want to do the expense sheet first. Get your expense sheet done first, because the prioritization sheet is going to pull numbers from the expense sheet. And it's going to say, okay, you have requested this much in your expense sheet. And then we're going to ask you to do 3 scenarios. So in prepping for the potential that we need to make reductions, where would you, if you had the option to make these reductions yourself in your court, where would you take them from? So we're going to ask you to do scenario A, which is a 10% reduction, scenario B, which is a 15%, and scenario C, which is a 20% reduction. And you'll see those numbers here. These will auto-populate when you fill out that expense tab. And this will say, okay, to reduce 10%, you need to reduce it by $36,503.50, and then goes down each time for more, right? And so then what we're going to ask you to do is say, okay, this is where I want to do it. So for example, in this example scenario, for scenario A, which is cutting 10%, we said, okay, for the administrative costs, those grant administrative costs, we are suggesting that you reduce this line item by $17,600. And then we'll also, to get to that number, we're going to take $19,000 from the original funds that were requested for a probation deputy. And then when you put those funds in there, it'll add up to your total reduction, right? Which should be the same or greater than this amount, or sorry. I'm so sorry, than this amount right here, right? And then it'll give you the new total down here. So we're saying if you cut $36,600 from that budget in scenario A, your new proposed budget would be $328,435. And then we do it again for scenario B and then scenario C. So a couple things that I tried to make clear in the example. You don't have to do the same line item. So maybe, for example, you were like, okay, we can handle, a couple cuts to administrative costs, but come scenario B, absolutely not. We're just going to cut it elsewhere. You don't have to do all the same across. You also can add new ones, right? So in this case, right, for scenario C, that was the only one that they cut. This particular Stetson County Court only cut $2,500 in scenario C, but didn't cut it in scenario B or scenario A. Now, the biggest thing with the prioritization sheet, and I want to be very, very, very crystal clear about this, is that while we will use it as much as we can and we want it as a guide, we absolutely cannot guarantee that this is what will happen. So we will do our best, but we absolutely cannot guarantee that these proposed prioritizations are going to be what we fund. So I apologize for that. We hope so. But again, this is coming back to why it's so important to provide those ties in the narrative sections as to why you need certain things or don't need certain things, because it'll help us when we're getting to having to make those cuts if we have to. We'll be able to prioritize, hopefully, what is going to help you all meet best practices and meet standards the closest. Now, I recognize this is new and it's kind of confusing, and also that's 12:59 p.m. So if you all need to go, please do not be offended. I am happy to stay. I am happy to answer questions. I am also happy to take questions either via email or by phone or by Teams if you want to get into this a little bit closer. But our hope is that this will kind of provide some guidance going forward. If we do end up having to make these reductions again, we'll have a better idea of what the courts really need at that core level to keep doing the good work you all are doing. So with that, any questions, thoughts?
Yeah, this is Frank, Adeline.
Yeah.
Question, is this prioritizing section optional or required?
I mean, I guess it's not required, but it would be very much in your best interest to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else have questions? All right, I'm going to stop sharing my window so that I can see you all again. All right, we don't have any hands raised. So with that, thank you all. Sorry we went a little bit over time, but thank you all for joining us. Again, this will be available online. If you have any questions, definitely reach out. And otherwise, I hope you have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk soon. Take care.